Welcome to the MMHP in the 989. Channeling all styles and eras of Michigan music history from the city by the bay. And now, here's your host, Scott Baker.
Back here at Studio 163 in Essexville, Michigan, and we are here today. Very special guest, Mr. Scott Seeburger in the house. How you doing, Scott?
I'm doing great.
Wonderful to see you. Thank you for making it out here.
Yeah, thank you. This is exciting. I think, podcasts are doing nothing but growing, in popularity and use. As, I think commercial radio isn't doing as much of this kind of thing. And so I think it's great.
I was talking to my editor, Kathy, at The Route, and she was saying that, certain stories that I've been writing have been really huge and it's an entertainment story because that's what I do. And I'm like, it's between that and the podcast, they kind of bounce off each other, if it can time it out just right. Because podcasts are the entire story. If you have time to put on your headphones or go over for a ride in the car and go check it out. So I know the podcasts have really brought along more detailed in the journalistic front anyway. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
We got Gary in the house. Dr. J, how you doing, Gary?
Doing great. Good to be back.
Oh, man. How you feeling?
Haven't had it. Survived COVID.
You sound wonderful. You sound Class A, as always. This is wonderful. How's the wife doing?
She's doing very well, and we had some good news from the oncologist. So, everything's on the upbeat and the positive, and so good thing.
Great. And the Hall of Fame is kicking along all summer?
It's doing great, yeah. A lot of people coming in and checking it out. And I think I might have mentioned a couple weeks ago that we're working with the Delta Planetarium on a couple projects. So Mike Murray and I've got a couple things in the works. That one thing probably this fall, and we got a big project, kind of maybe a light show, laser.
That's cool.
However you might want to call it, dealing with Michigan rock and roll music at the museum. And I don't know if you've been to the museum lately, but boy, they've got some great equipment and some high-tech visuals. I'm real excited to see what we might be able to come together and put together for this thing.
The exhibit is very professional looking, and it's interesting to look at. I'm speaking now as someone who saw it for the first time, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago. Nice looking exhibit.
Well, I had some really high-quality people that worked with me on that. Avram Golden did all the framing, and Nick Van Horn did the design, and we have another young guy, artist from Bay City named Miles Rosnowski, who can literally do anything, and he was kind of our MVP, and, if we had a problem, Miles could solve it. He did the signs, like the lighted sign and all that kind of thing. Very creative guy. And by the way, he's got a great exhibit of his work at the Saginaw Museum on
Castle.
No, it's not the Castle. It's the Saginaw Art Museum. It's in Michigan. Yeah, it's well worth checking out. Miles is a very creative guy, and he's got a small gallery with some other artists over on Midland Street. In fact, it's right underneath where the old Mickey's Big Bop Teen Club was at one time. Wow. A little bit of Bay City rock and roll history right there, let me tell you.
Wow, very cool. A lot of cool stuff going on. It's summertime here. We're in the middle of July. That was Dr. J. Sir Fred, what's going on with you?
Well, I've been doing good and going to see a few live bands lately. Mm-hmm. And one of them, speaking of Michigan rock and roll, I went to see a band called Soundproof.
Oh, yeah.
City guys. Terry Kelly is the lead singer.
Former director of the museum, Ron Bloomfield, is in that band. Yeah, they kind of took a cue from some of the things I was doing. Did they do the Michigan rock and roll history?
They sure did. Matter of fact,
right.
And I'm sitting there, and I was talking to Terry earlier, and his partner, who did most of the talking.
Yeah, that would be Ron.
Okay, told the whole story of Sir Mac Rice that I know he got from my book or somewhere. I wrote it, And then they went into, of course, Mustang Sally. But then they did a Mitch Ryder song. They told a story, and it was all really good.
Yeah, I saw them do it out at State Park.
Oh.
Where were they doing
State
it?
Park.
Oh, was that State Park too? Right, okay. Yeah, I guess it would have been maybe last year or the year
Oh,
before.
really? That's what they did then?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's a nice little program they've got.
Oh, yeah. I that's my third or fourth one I've been to. Yeah, I like it.
Mr. Mike Beatty's in the house here, archiving for us. How you doing, Mike?
Doing great.
Good. Mike got to catch Freddie and I. We got to sit in just recently at Scotty Sandbar with
Seems like a long time ago.
It does. It was just 2 or 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago now, right?
It's way back in Mike's
Archives.
archives.
Yeah. That was Crazy Chester.
Tracy Chester.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Do you know that band, Scott?
No.
My mind.
Charlie Walmsley.
Tom Ball. plays
Andy
for-
Rogers.
Tom Ball. Yes. Tom Ball from CMU.
Right.
Yeah.
He's on stand-up bass.
Yes.
They're a really good band. Good choice of songs.
Really mixed a lot of different tunes. I thought that was pretty cool. And you had Roscoe, yourself sitting in. That was cool. Steve McRae.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Gary was there. We had the whole podcast crew on hand that night. That was fun. But let's shift gears here to Scott. What is who wants to kick off the questioning tonight? Because you guys all know each other pretty well, so fire away.
I think we got to go in the Wayback Machine, don't
All right.
we?
Yeah.
All right, back to the radio station.
Yeah.
Boy, talk about living a teenage dream, having your own radio station, playing the tunes. Give us a little background on your pirate radio station and WSJS.
Yeah, there were three of us that started it, and the story how it happened is we went into the radio station WMDN. My brother won a record, and they gave us a tour. We saw the transmitter room, we saw the music library, the studio, and the front office. That was pretty much what that station looked like, and we walked out and said we could do that. I'm 16 years old. My brother John Seeburger is 15. Bill Dickerson is 14. And we felt, here was the problem. When you were living in Midland at that time, you had WMDN, a good radio station, but they're playing Peggy Lee and Al Martino and Frank Sinatra, all good artists, liked them all, but they weren't playing the music that the young generation wanted to hear. And you guys know what I mean. So in Midland, we had the choice of listening to WSAM, but the signal was not good, and you couldn't hear it very well. You had WKNX, which was a daytime station, and when it became nightfall, or they signed off.
Right.
So in the wintertime, that's like 5 o'clock.
Right.
They're gone. And so we could pick up WTAC. It wasn't that good. So in Midland, what my friends and I did, we listened to WABC New York at night, or WTAC. Those were kind of the two
You
choices.
probably got Chicago, too, didn't you?
We could have WLS,
right?
yeah, WLS, and what was Fort Wayne? WOWO, WOW.
I think so, yes.
Yeah,
WLAC and Memphis or Nashville.
never picked those up, but
That was the big rhythm and blues station.
oh, I can only imagine how great Memphis must have been in those days. So, there were the three of us. Bill Dickerson was an electronics genius. I don't use that term lightly. He today is the CEO of a small company that he built that does test equipment for the power grid. And, this is all equipment that he designed and built. And he has a manufacturing plant, a small manufacturing plant in California. That's the latest I've heard. My brother John was very good with electronics, and I had the huge music collection. I had been collecting music since the age of 7, and that's a story by itself. So Bill built the transmitter. Now, you could get kits from Lafayette or Allied Electronics for kids, and it was kids that bought them, but it was basically you were broadcasting in your own home. Yeah, it didn't have any signal to it. It might go 100 feet if you were lucky, so you might hit a home on either side of you at the best. Bill and the FCC had a limit on 100 milliwatts for radio stations that could operate without a license. Most people, what we had was a pirate station, and when people think of pirate, they think of, the boats out in the UK or the border blasters down in Mexico. But in the United States, you would get these kids that would, buy one of these Allied or Lafayette radio station transmitters and put together kind of a pretend fun radio station. Bill, because of his extraordinary knowledge, built the transmitter, and it was 100 milliwatt, but it was super high quality. The secret to the sauce was the antenna system we installed. We had a very elaborate antenna system, and it allowed us to cover about half or more of the town. And when we first started, I'll never forget, we were testing the equipment to say, oh my God, I can hear the signal and we're a mile away. That's unbelievable. Because we walked with a transistor radio, a good one, and we tested what was our field. What could we do after Bill had built this? And the next thing you know, we have a control console that Bill built. The turntables were scrounged by my brother on garbage day. Just walking back and forth to school, he would find turntables, and they were broken down, and John would fix them up. He was phenomenal at this. I mean, the whole thing, when we say it was scratch built, it was literally it was scratched. And
where did you have the antenna?
The antenna was on the side of the house. It went up above the house. And then we had a second antenna that was strung through the trees. So we could cover a lot of ground with the antenna.
And this is at your house?
Correct.
And your parents were okay with this? These wild teenagers with their electronics?
The story with them is they were amazing. So at any rate, they were going up to the cottage. We had a little cottage up on Wixom Lake, and we're waving, have a nice day. And they took off, and wham, we go into action setting up the antenna system. And the antenna system went 10 feet below ground and 20 feet above ground. And we set it all up. By the time they came back, the job was done, and we just said, "I would put that little antenna up."
Wow!
So it was attached somehow to the house?
Correct. It was. It was hooked right to the house.
Okay.
Yeah,
Man.
It wasn't freestanding. And so and then so we had a beautiful console. We had 2 tape decks. We had a phone and a phone tap so we could record dedications and requests. And so Bill set it up technically. I had a lot of the records, but they had some too. We had some albums, mostly 45s we had. And that's kind of how it got started. We started getting dedications and requests. I mean, like the first week, we'd get 2 or 3 calls. Nobody knew who we were.
Yeah, I was curious on how you got the word out.
Well, you got by word of mouth. And then, sooner or later, there were 5 or 6 calls, and then 10, then 20, then 50 a night. We were on weekends, Friday and Saturday, 8 till midnight. Sometimes we stayed on till 1. And when we signed on April 5th, 1968, if you recall, that was one day after Martin Luther King had been assassinated. Mm-hmm. That day, on the 5th that we signed on, Washington was under emergency because they were worried about riots and stuff. It was a tumultuous period when we came on, and it seemed like it was the whole next 33 months that we were on the air. We signed off December 31st, 1970, and it was strictly, it was illegal, but we didn't sell advertising, we didn't swear, and we didn't have an agenda, a political agenda, or anything we were trying to accomplish. We were just getting the new music out to the kids in Midland who were desperate to hear that kind of stuff. Cream and Michigan groups like Frost, Cherry Slush, Question Mark and the Mysterians, and all the rest. Mitch Ryder, Bob Seger played a lot of that. And so, on air, if you listen to it, and I do have a 5-minute recording that gives you a chance to get a feel for what we sounded like. It was very fast-paced, and it was pretty much current music. We might go back a couple of years. And we talked about teen stuff. We had a teen talk show called The People's Voice, and we talked about teen issues like civil rights, the environment, the Detroit Tigers and how they were doing. Remember, 68 was a great year for the
certainly
Tigers.
was.
Yeah.
So those are the things we talked about from a teen perspective. Then we had game shows that kids called in on, but a lot of dedications and requests. It was really kind of fell to me. I wanted something that was super interactive. And so people were talking about it. And when we started putting... we had a listening list. Everyone had a top 40 survey. TAC, all of them had a top 40 survey. We had a top 10 listening list because between the three of us, we couldn't afford 40 records at any given time. And then we later expanded it to about 20, but we got those in the schools. And so the requests that would come in, we were generating about 150 phone calls a night.
Wow.
That's in a 4-hour span. So you got a call, you hung up the phone. This is rotary dial.
Is this on your parents' phone?
Yes. They had 3 phones, one in the basement where we operated, one in the kitchen, and one in their bedroom. And they shut off the phones in the kitchen and in their bedroom because that phone rang all night long. We get a call, record a dedication request, hang up, boom. As soon as the thing went down, another phone call was coming in. And my folks used to have to tell their friends, please, they'd say, my mom was Noreen. They said, Noreen, we tried to call you all Friday night, and then we tried Saturday night. My mom would say, no, don't call at night. Call during the day. At night, the kids have got it. The kids have it all tied up, and so that's how it started. So we stopped keeping track. We did a lot of statistics all the time. We were recording, measuring things, and when we were hitting 150 phone calls a night consistently, we just stopped counting because there was so many. And sometimes, if you'll recall, Midland had a drive-in theater that was probably 2 or 3 miles out, the Sunset Drive-In.
I remember the Sunset. Yes.
Do you?
Sure.
So the Sunset Drive-In, while the kids were waiting for the film to start, instead of listening to whatever the Sunset Drive-In was playing, they would listen to our radio station. And they had a payphone at the radio station. So they would come and call from the payphone and request songs on the air.
That's awesome.
You said this was 1968?
68, 69, and 70.
I was just thinking that's when I was going to Northwood
Yeah?
in Midland.
Yeah.
Did your station reach there?
Let's see.
Because I can't remember. I know I listened to music, but I can't.
I'm not certain because that's the other side of town.
Okay.
And we were in the northern part of town.
Okay.
And it just, you might have been able to pick it up. When
I just can't remember if I did or not, but
yeah.
Whatever station at the time, the music was okay.
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
We'd drive around and listen in the car when finally, we were old enough to drive a car. and we'd listen to the station. It was always fun to see how far it would go. But the pattern was uneven, but generally, we could go a couple, 3 miles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you guys branch into some DJ work?
Well, as it turned out, schools started requesting us to DJ their dances. And this was unexpected. We hadn't planned on doing anything like that. And so this would have been spring of 69. And we said, okay. We didn't know what we were doing. We had never DJ'd a dance before. So we went to the first school was Northeast Middle School in Midland. It was a junior high dance. And we blew out our speakers on the last song because we pushed the equipment so hard. And this was then a challenge for Bill Dickerson. He went back home during the summer, built speaker enclosures that were like 4 feet high, And we could fill any gymnasium as loud as any band in the region. That made us pretty unique because it wasn't a tinny or small sound. We had a big sound. And every year it seemed like we kept growing. And when we signed off on 1970, at the end of 1970, the SJS DJs kept going. We were making money. We started out, in our first job, we made $9. We split the $9, $3 a piece. I'm sure we put 5 times into that. Then there were a number of venues in Midland for dances, and we worked our way up to the community center, which was where most of the bands play. Everyone talks about the blue light. We talk about the blue light, but
that was probably pretty much done by the time you guys started your radio.
It was
station, right?
Spring of '68, they were gone. They were only around 2 years. It was pretty brief. But the community center did that 4:00 Saturday night dance in Midland, and it drew teens by the hundreds. So we started DJing that, and we were making, $25 or so for a show. Then we were supporting bands, the Bitter Tears, Flood, Manic Depression, some of these groups, and we were the secondary act. The band was the primary act, but we filled in when they took breaks. And then it got to be, so we were the only act at the dance because, and Scott, you may get mad at me for saying this, but, the bands in that era, they almost treated it like a concert situation. And we only had one goal, to create a festive mood, and put people on the dance floor and whip that crowd up. So we first started working in Midland. Then we went over to Gladwin, and then, more of Midland County, Coleman and so forth. And then we were going over to Saginaw. And we hit a lot of the schools in Saginaw. We hit a lot of them in Bay City. I remember one night in Bay City at Essexville Garber, we drew 900 people. It was unbelievable. That's a big dance, let me tell you. And we found out they were coming because the week before we were Bay City Handy, and and kids were starting to follow us around a little bit. Now that's almost unheard of with DJs, but there were hardly any DJs in those days.
I was going to say, how many DJs do you know of even back then?
Dick Fabian.
Like going to. Like school to school.
Dick Fabian.
Oh, he was.
Those type. Bob Dyer, Dick Fabian.
I didn't know they went to school. I thought they were just at a radio show.
Ken Clark, Uncle Don Andrews.
Okay.
They were the top DJs.
Right.
Okay. I always assumed they just had a radio show. I never knew they DJ'd
Well, they used to. So all those guys DJ'd even the dances at St. Joseph High School.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we had maybe 200 people going to that school, but yet you could afford to get Bob Dyer or Dick Fabian and some of these other people DJ'd those dances.
And they did in Midland. In fact, I believe Dick Fabian DJ'd at the Blue Light once in a while. But we had a huge sound system, and then we started adding lights. And we had something we called color organs, and they were huge. And they were very effective, but we couldn't transport them out of Midland because it took 2 trips to do it. Our station wagon could only handle so much. So Bill designed something more portable that we could carry. So when we DJ'd, we always asked for a big, long stage. And people would say, what does a DJ need a big, long stage for? What we did was we got kids to come up on the risers and dance, and we backlit them. So you had all this color and movement going on in the stage, and it looked like it's about 5 times bigger than it really was. And it was the kids that provided, that atmosphere.
That was a good call. That's a Soul Train move.
Yeah. And as a DJ, I was very interactive with the audience. I'd do an opening 2 or 3 minutes talking about their school teams and what was going on at the school. So I thought we worked pretty hard at winning them over. And of course, we always provided, not only great dance music, but we had, what was really important. Maybe you'll disagree, but kids liked a good slow song because it's an awkward time in their lives, especially at the junior high age or middle school age. And they wanted, that slow song that they could ask some girl or vice versa. And so we had a lot of success. Then, and I remember, in 1974, 75, Kiss was breaking out. Remember? About that time? Shout It Out Loud, Rock and Roll All Night, that kind of thing. And the junior high crowd, the 12, 13-year-olds, they couldn't get it enough. But on the other hand, who was also big around that period they loved Osmond music and Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. So when you were doing the young kids, Kiss, Jackson 5, Osmonds, it was kind of amazing.
What a mix.
Yeah, isn't it?
Wow.
So, okay, you continued the DJ work then after you put the station to rest then. And this kind of like what you raised money for college and so on through your...
I think it raised money so I could buy more records. Because I was buying a lot at the time. In 75, disco hit, and then that took us to a new level. We quit in 1978. We had careers. We had all graduated from college by then. And, we had to move on, but we didn't stop for lack of business. The other thing that's interesting, you might get a kick out of from that era, the 70s, Elvis Presley dies in 1977 in August. And Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley are popular on television. For some reason, in the late 70s, early 80s, we would get requests, would you do an all-50s dance? And I can remember doing an all-50s dance in the late 70s, early 78, and they're yelling, chanting, we want Elvis, we want Elvis. Strange situation in 1978 in a different, that was such a different era.
Yeah.
Yeah, that nostalgia thing really, had a big comeback there in the...
Yeah.
Well,
even the movie Grease, right? Didn't that come around then?
absolutely.
There was Grease. There was American Graffiti.
Yeah.
I think is the one that really kicked it off.
Yeah.
In a big, big way.
Huge.
Because you look at that soundtrack, which
It's a good one.
was a big, big hit.
It was.
Literally everything in there was pre-1964. It was all oldies.
And
a lot of doo-wop.
And that led to Happy Days. The TV show Happy Days came out of American Graffiti.
Right.
And Ronnie Howard, that's, he was in both.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so that was kind of a feel for what the 70s were like, but we did it because we had equipment that people didn't have. You couldn't go into a store and buy, the equipment or order it today like you can.
What did you do with the equipment once you guys stopped doing the shows?
Well, we were always innovating with equipment, and Bill would sometimes sell the equipment to radio stations. And when he'd change out, for him it was fun to create new equipment. And in the beginning, he did really beautiful finished pieces. They looked so professional looking. By the end, he wasn't quite as concerned about that sort of thing. But he would usually sell them to radio stations, and they would want to buy it. And he also made speaker equipment for other bands that wanted a big sound. So our enclosure was so big that kids would camp out in front of the speakers because we had these flanges that came out from the speaker, and it was like a little hut. I don't know how else to explain it. And you could get like 3 kids sitting in there. I thought they were crazy. They were taking their eardrums out. But they did. It was a wonderful era. The 70s was a great era for a lot of dancing. It was just fun. And
now you continue to be the main record supplier, would you say? For the dances and so on.
Oh yeah, I got to be the only one.
Okay.
And because Bill was spending money on equipment, and I always bought the records. And John dropped out at some point. My brother John dropped out.
Well, and we got to go back here. What started you as a record collector, a record buyer? What was there a key artist or somebody that just started the whole ball rolling for you?
There was a key moment. My dad was a big record collector. When I turned 7, within the first 2 weeks of being 7, my father died. And I got free use of his collection. But then my grandmother died on my mother's side. My grandfather on my mother's side died. And my closest uncle died. We had 4 people die in 1 year. My mother's entire support system was gone. And my mom was very, very concerned. And I was very concerned. What's going through my mind at 7, 8 years old is, well, what happens if my mom dies? All these other people around me have died. What's going to happen to me? Am I supposed to take over the family? I don't know what to do.
Wow.
And so I think to process my grief, I buried myself in music. And I would play a 45 10 or 15 times in a row. White Sport Coat and a Pink Carnation by Marty Robbins. And then it was Little Willie John. And and people knew that I drew everything in black. I'd have a box of crayons and everything would come out in black. I believe I was processing my grief. And I eventually came out of it when I was about 15, 16. It was a teacher. I think that, of course, Gary, we know how great teachers are.
Of course.
Yeah. And I was getting involved. At the time we were doing the radio station, I was doing a lot more than that. I was shooting films, and 8mm films, and entering in the Kodak Teenage Movie Competition. And they always had a soundtrack. And then I was very involved in theater, school theater, and forensics. And it was my teacher who kept drawing me into this. Letha Perkins, and to this day, I think the world over. And that combined with the radio station, all these things kind of catapulted me. But I had several years where I was the very quiet, not very talkative kind of person, just processing and thinking about all of this. And I fell in love with my dad's 78 collection. My generation, at my age, when kids were 12, 13, everyone gravitated towards the Beatles in 1964. I was well beyond that. I was into what my dad had. Harry James, Fats Waller, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Andrews Sisters, on and on. All these artists from the 30s and 40s. And I was well versed in that. The first LP I ever bought, I bought it for my mom as a birthday gift. I was 8 or 9 years old. It was a compilation disc by Harry James because I knew she and my dad liked Harry James. And so I thought she might enjoy that. She didn't listen to it. I guess I did. So that's what brought me in. And so I had quite a little collection going by the time the Beatles hit in 64.
But it wasn't really rock and roll, then you're saying, right?
Correct. Oh, no, it wasn't.
So what started the rock and roll thing going for you?
Well, I was, and I've always been as much or more interested in jazz than rock and roll. But I mean, you know what our generation was listening to: the Byrds and the Beatles and Beach Boys. Wow, everything's starting with a B.
Right.
Yeah, but that's what we were all listening to as kids. And when you start a radio station, you're going to play what the kids want to hear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly. But I was leading to the point, you're buying the records, so you had a little bit of a shift there because you had to be buying the sounds that the other kids wanted to hear, which of course is basically rock and roll.
Right.
At that point.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a lot. I was buying a lot of that kind of stuff, and it was all 45s. We would ride our bikes with the radio station. We would ride our bikes. We're in Chestnut Hill. We'd have to ride our bikes 4 miles to downtown Midland, where the record stores were. We'd go into House Records, and they knew us. We were coming. Bill, John, and I, all three of us, would ride down, even when there's snow, and we'd come down, and we all had $2 a piece to buy a record. Records were 88 cents, sometimes 69.
Right.
And so we each bought 2 records. Wow, that's 6 new records for the station.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then we'd go to Woolworth and we'd sit up at the counter and we would order a Coke and fries, get our nourishment so we could go the 4 miles back home.
Wow. Wow.
That's how we built
story.
it. Yeah, and as I say, as time went on, I provided a lot of the records. I worked for Yankee stores, my first paid job, and I'm like 17 or 18, and I'm working for E. Brooks Company, which was a sub-business within Yankee stores that sold records. So I'm working in the record department of Yankees. And it was so funny. Everybody at Christmas time, they'd buy these little portable record players. You remember them? Mm-hmm. And so I was always good at getting them out of the box and demonstrating them. But I never could get them, ever could get them back in the box. And I just have this mangled mess. And they say, okay, we'll just take it. We'll just go, oh, good.
Did you ever end up purchasing some records because of requests that were kind of against your wanting to play? You were like, I don't want to do this. Probably later in your career, but like, what would they have been?
Sugar Sugar was, a monster hit in August 1969. It's so funny, I can visualize this all in my head, when all this stuff hit. But, Sugar Sugar would be an example of a kind of a bubblegum thing that we probably were not as interested in playing. We'd rather play Iron Butterfly.
Yeah. But you got so many requests for it. You're like,
oh yeah.
Well, it's a gigantic hit.
Yeah.
Yes.
You played a lot of, or I don't know a lot, but Michigan rock and roll.
Yes, and we talked about the Michigan artists. Another song that you wouldn't expect when we first signed on, "Love Is Blue" by Paul Moriarty and his orchestra.
Oh yeah.
That thing was huge with teens.
Yeah. Oh.
And we didn't expect to play it, but they requested it so much we played it. So those are a couple of examples.
Okay.
But yeah, we talked about the Michigan groups when Cherry Slush showed up at St. Bridget's Church in Midland on a flatbed truck playing "Day Don't Come" and their hits. I Cannot Stop You.
Yeah, that was the big one.
The big one, and we were there and we reported about it. We also did some things that weren't right. For example, we went in I think it was February of '69. Neil Diamond played Delta College.
Delta College, yes.
We recorded the whole concert and played it back on the station.
Mike, hey, can you track this down for us, please?
But let me tell you something. You could set up tape recorders. There were several tape recorders set up for the Neil Diamond concert. Bob Seger was the first artist to ever play the Midland Center for the Arts, professional artist. And that was January 1971. And it was, what was his album?
71.
Early 71.
Let's see, Mongrel came out in 70. That had the hit Lucifer.
I think it was Mongrel.
Then he had that folk, Brand New Morning.
Yeah, Brand New Morning. It wasn't that. I think it was Mongrel. And we set up our recorder at the brand new Midland Center for the Arts. Station was off the air at that point, and recorded the entire concert, along with about 3 other people. And there were decks set up in front.
So where are these tapes?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have ours.
Oh.
We've looked all over the place. Someone borrowed it. My brother did the recording. We recorded ours right off the soundboard. They got it hooked up. Yeah, and
live Bob Seger from 1970, 71.
You're talking gold right there.
Tell me and I said, like this was like 5 years ago. I said, guys, that thing's worth a lot. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew where it was. It was gone, but it's right.
It'll come up on the bottom of a box someday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get a hold of the podcast.
There it is.
Bob broke a string or something on the very first song, Teachin' Blues.
Yeah. Okay. I think that was from that album, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and that was his opening song, and he had a little a hiccup there and had to fix it. And we also went to the Delta Pop Festival. We didn't. I
was there.
Yeah, I don't think we recorded that, but I remember Ted Nugent bang because the equipment broke down for their group and Amboy Dukes, and he was still the showman way back then. He got the crowd going without any equipment working, and Seger performed
rattles.
He had rattles or something, and Seger was missing one of his musicians, wasn't he? So he's trying.
I can't remember.
I think he was playing guitar and organ, both. On Ramblin' Gamblin' Man. Of course, I can tell you the top 3 songs we played, and Ramblin' Gamblin' Man was number 1. Dance to the Music was in there, and I can't remember now the third. but I can tell you, Ramblin' Gamblin' Man was just huge. We would play that at a dance. This is right up through 1973, 74. It would ignite a dance floor. Moni Moni was the third one.
Oh, yeah.
And now you hear DJs at weddings, they'll play an oldie, and you'll hear Moni Moni or something. But that song was on fire back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Well, Tommy James, you
Yeah.
know, hit after hit after hit.
Oh, you aren't kidding.
Yeah.
And did you get to play live on your playback that Seeger? Oh, you were done by then. You said, right?
Yes,
You
yeah,
just taped that for your own vanity.
right. Well, yeah, my brother taped it for his use. I never had it, but
Wow.
we were all excited. Of course, you know, it was Phil Coltrop who I believe brought those acts in, and he brought in Mitch Ryder and some others. Mike Quattro Jam Band to the Midland Center for the Arts. And when they built the Center for the Arts, they never had any intention of having those kind of acts in. Phil Coltrop, who was from the group Breadfruit, like a 15 or 16-year-old entrepreneur, was booking these concerts. He later brought in Badfinger into the Midland High School gym, if you recall that.
Right. I remember that.
Wow.
And Coltrop hired us for the Badfinger concert to provide kind of continuity and announcing, because that was like an all afternoon, evening event. It was a long event. But I have a lot of, and then Phil Coltrop got big into doing festivals and booking acts. So I had a lot of respect for Phil Coltrop because he was so clever and he was so young. I mean, he was like we were. He was so young.
He's out of Midland too, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. One of the
Well,
first
it's nice
festivals.
because that's a
guys.
beautiful venue. The Center for the Arts.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
terrific.
Well, if you recall, I think it was the Mitch Ryder concert, but I might be wrong. They stormed the stage and they were dancing up there, probably on Devil with the Blue Dress or something with Mitch. And that shut down rock and roll at the Midland Center for the Arts for years. They would not allow an indoor act to be booked. They did bring in Chuck Berry and Roy Orbison, but they were outdoor shows. Mm-hmm. And this was like later into the 80s, maybe even the late 80s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I don't remember.
When did you become a Elvis Presley fan?
In December 1968. Does that date mean anything?
Yeah.
It was
Well, that would have been the comeback
Comeback.
special. Yeah.
exactly.
Did you see the movie?
Yes, I did.
Because that's a big part of it.
Yes, it is a part of it.
Excellent.
I thought
that kid became Elvis.
Austin Butler.
I can't remember his. That's it.
Yeah, he did. I thought it captured the spirit of Elvis Presley, the spirit of Presley's life. Yeah, people who are really knowledgeable, like you guys are, about music and his life, there are some inaccuracies in the film.
Sure. The movie.
But yeah, that's right, and they're doing it for dramatic effect. And but I thought overall it was a heck of a film. I think it's approaching $150 million, which is incredible.
Yeah, I think the only movie that's made more money is Top Gun.
That's the only one.
Yeah.
See, at the beginning of the movie, I don't know if you remember, they play Baby Let's Play House.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I was the manager of Arthur Gunter.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And Arthur, if you were still alive, I don't know his estate,
But I hope
estate.
I hope he gets some money out of it.
Yeah.
No, he's been dead since mid-70s.
Yeah.
But his
But,
estate
So is
won't, huh?
Elvis.
No, there's no estate.
No.
Yeah.
So I was getting my percent for a little while early on, like back in the 90s or 80s. And then the company got bought out by a bigger company and a bigger company, and they had highfalutin lawyers. And I just said, well,
Yeah.
Arthur, I tried, and I was sharing it with his common law wife early on. So now, just the publishing, it ends with the publishing company.
Yeah.
Whoever owns it now.
Well, I'm sure it's a big corporate entity.
But if the movie is up to $150 million,
Yeah. International, and I think it's doing bigger in Europe than in the United States. It's doing well in the United States. Don't
Well,
get me wrong.
then there's the soundtracked album.
Yep,
And
that's coming.
Austin Butler
That, too.
actually performed that song. So
He did, right?
yeah, that was one of the inaccuracies because when Elvis debuted on Louisiana Hayride, he did his two. He only had one record out, so he did That's All Right and Blue Moon of Kentucky, and that's actually there's a pretty good audio recording of those two performances.
I have that
Elvis.
45. I used to
So
have it in.
yeah, but I
store.
agree. I think that Baz Luhrmann, his approach, which was kind of over the top.
Totally.
I think it had to be done that way because although Elvis made such an enormous impact back in the 50s, I think in today's audience it needed to be exaggerated to a certain extent to kind of convey what happened then, because it was pretty
I
amazing.
felt it
Yeah, I had.
in the movie theater. I felt like, wow.
Yeah.
I felt all over it again.
Yeah, he did a wonderful job of, taking that story, which is immense, and telling it basically in 2.5 hours. It was incredible.
Yeah, and there's still so much to the story.
yeah.
It's such a complex story. But you asked me what got me interested. It was that television special, and my jaw dropped. I kind of had the same feeling when I saw James Brown in the Tammy film, if you recall that. James Brown. How did the Rolling Stones follow James Brown after that unbelievable performance?
Well, they did a pretty good job of following,
Yeah.
actually. But yeah, I agree. I was a longtime Elvis fan.
Me too.
I saw him, which was, I think, his first performance on national television. I was only 9 years old, and my parents used to watch. As a family, we always watched the Jackie Gleason show. It was a big favorite. And when he went on hiatus, they had the Dorsey brothers. They had a variety show. And, of course, my parents were big band aficionados. They loved that. So ended up watching that with my parents. And so I saw Elvis. It would have been, I think, January 1956.
That was it. That was the beginning.
I had never seen anything like it.
No, and that
It was phenomenal.
I know, I know, and I think they had him back how many times? He was on.
I was
there?
on like 5 or 6
times?
straight weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was incredible, and this was before Ed Sullivan, of course, and Milton Berle and Steve Allen, and he became a guest on all these shows throughout 1956, which really took his career, just blew it
into
up
the
big
Astro.
time.
Yeah. And it was Tom Neal. Was that the original manager, or was it Bob Neal?
I think it was Bob Neal.
Bob Neal, the original manager who booked him on those first shows. And everyone gives Colonel Tom Parker credit for all the television, but it was Neal that got him on television the first time.
Yeah. And then it just
Exploded.
Yeah. Then Elvis took it from there, basically.
Well, he did.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. And of course, he got paid $50,000 for the 3 performances on Ed Sullivan. And you compare that then to which was the highest amount of money ever paid to a guest star on television for years after that. Because I believe the Beatles got was it $10,000 apiece for their 3 performances?
Yeah, I'm not
as a
sure
group?
about that one, but
I think it was $10,000 they got paid, and Presley got $50,000. But that shows you, though, the strength of Colonel Tom Parker.
yeah.
Because he was in the catbird seat when he negotiated that contract.
and the draw appeal of Elvis Presley.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's easy to book deals when you got somebody that everybody wants to see.
absolutely,
Absolutely. But yeah, Colonel Tom, though, he didn't understand the value
no,
of Elvis's band.
Yeah.
And,
that's for sure.
that in a way, ended up really hurting Elvis. Because if you look at the way that they started out, they were just 3 guys. I mean, and they developed this sound, which was
unbelievable.
kind
for
of
3
like,
people.
sounded a little bit like country music and a little bit of R&B. And then, of course, you have the vocal.
Yeah.
That was the selling point. It was Elvis's vocal. It's just like, what? Over the moon,
And they split their salaries 3 ways. 33, 33, 33. And then, of course, when Parker gets on board, then it's those guys.
I
Scotty
think they
Moore.
were on a salary, right?
Yeah, and of low salary.
Yeah,
I-
very low salary.
Yeah. And, I thought they got cheated.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
And, him just not seeing the value. There's that, they had a chemistry going
Yes, they did.
that, it's like any great band, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or anybody you want to name.
Right.
There's a certain chemical thing there.
Right.
And, when after Elvis lost the band, his sound changed a little bit. And he lost that. It was still all kinds of great recordings, but that chemistry of, being on the road together and working out songs together
Right.
as a band, that was lost forever.
Lost. And, he was doing those films in the 60s
they were awful.
with pickup musicians. And so you're right. The sound was not developed very well.
And he was so uninspired, that songs he was forced to sing, which kind of followed the paper thin plot. There's just how could you get excited about that? Not the same way that it was, when he was so directly involved in his music. And it's a shame. But that, going back to that, I think like most people, you almost kind of were writing Elvis off, that he was just kind of, this guy that was great a number of years ago, but maybe no longer. And then to see that special in December of '69, that brought it all back home.
Boy, that was mind blowing for me.
Yeah.
So did you go back and buy his older records?
I was just lucky to be buying albums in those days. Yeah, and I was picking it up.
45s,
Yeah. I was
By that time, he had.
right. I was starting to pick up stuff. Yeah, and the '50s is still my favorite decade, and I am still discovering artists and songs all the time from the '50s. It's just my favorite decade. I know that is contrarian to what many people feel about the '60s and '70s is where so much happened. Rock and roll matured. It got more sophisticated. But I still like that rawness of the '50s, and I like the pop singers, folk music, R&B, everything out of the '50s. There's something about it.
For the last couple of days, I've been reading that Fortune book.
Oh, yeah.
And
Mind over matter.
and then reading about one of the Fortune artists, and then going to YouTube, and usually I can find it on there and playing it.
Yeah, that's the incredible thing
And
about
it's,
YouTube. All these obscure records are there.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
I didn't know about a lot of the stuff coming out of Grand Rapids back in the '60s.
Yeah.
And there was some interesting stuff, but we didn't have access to that. So I'm still learning about the '60s too. I mean, there's still a lot to know.
I burned that collection of Fenton records for Scott a while back. Scream Loud. Mm-hmm. Do you have that?
No.
Double CD? Oh my gosh.
That's really
That's
good.
one you probably want to pick up, or I'll be happy to burn you a copy of it.
Can I
but
buy one someplace?
I'm sure you could get it online.
eBay from Europe is around $60, $70 right now.
Well, I've played that
It's
much.
a 2 CD collection.
Yeah, and there is a fairly nice little booklet that gives you a little bit of biographical background on the groups. But I'm trying to think how many songs there are.
Oh, it's
what was there, like 30 songs per disc?
Yeah. It's close. It's like 28 and 30, I think.
Yeah, and there really is some high quality little 45s. In fact, trying to think, was the Cherry Slush on there?
Yeah, so was Timothy's Blues Company.
Well, yeah, the Blues Company was on there. I'm not sure if the Cherry Slush, they recorded one
it was
record.
under a different...
Yeah, but I'm not sure it was on that collection. I think they did the Beatles song Birthday and the Birds song Feel a Whole Lot Better. I think they recorded it with Kalmbach, but I don't think it's on that particular collection. But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
To fast forward to more recent years, what did I do with some of this information, and this love I have for music? First of all, I will not allow a musician to give me the CD, and they do it all the time. I said, my feeling is you worked hard on that. You deserve to be compensated. And so I always purchase CDs. I never take freebies from musicians. But then, I got involved in a lot of different groups, including the Bay Arts Council and Winona Park in the days. And
I have that shirt.
well, I didn't know if you had it. I wanted to bring this shirt so you could see it. The Michigan 60s Rock and Roll Reunion we put together.
That was outstanding.
And it felt like, look at the acts.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh yeah.
You do know that I booked the ration because I was living in Ann Arbor at the time.
yeah.
And Scott Morgan was on our label, so I got the Rationals on there.
Yeah, you should read out that list.
Well, the list is Dick Wagner and the Frost, the Bossman, that was also Dick's group, Question Mark and the Mysterians, Count the Colony, the Rationals, and the Paupers from this area. And we put that all together when I was on the board. It was a phenomenal event. Yeah. And I can remember being backstage, and you mentioned Scott Morgan. He came off the stage and says, it didn't feel quite right. And I said, how did you think it went, Scott, talking to me? And I said, well, Scott, I thought you had a great set, but you didn't play my favorite song. And he said, what's that? And I said, I Need You. You remember that? Need You? He didn't do I Need You.
Yeah, what a great ballad.
Oh, yeah. And he said, you're right. Should have done that one. and then, but I mean, we were thrilled to have them. And then after the show was done, Marianne Reynolds Burt was the manager for Dick Wagner, and she and Marianne and Dick both made the comment, whoa, Question Mark and Mysterians are pretty good. Yeah. Still. And I said, yes, they are.
But they didn't have Frankie on keyboards that day.
They didn't?
They didn't.
No. I don't remember that.
No, they had a different keyboard player. But, Question Mark was, in great form, and they did sound great. And that was because I think, were you working with Dick at that point?
No, I was 6 years later. I came in at the end of '99 and worked until 2003.
Because I think that was the first time that Dick had put out a CD with all the Bossman singles on it.
Yes, that's true.
Wasn't it?
Yes.
At that event?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was so excited to get that. You remembered all those great singles that were on the radio all the time.
I think Don Richard put that together, and Ray York at the studio.
Yeah, that was really a good collection, and he had a couple of the early Frost 45s too.
Mm-hmm.
And then
what year was that? Yeah.
94. Did you say on the shirt?
This was, I believe this was 94, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought that's what it said.
It's about right.
Yeah.
August 6th, 94.
Yeah.
Then do you remember what we repeated the rock and roll reunion down at Winona Park in Bay City the next year? Do you remember who we had? It was the Contours and Mitch Ryder.
Whoa.
It was like 95 degrees that day. I don't think we had more than 20 people in the audience.
Yeah, that was really disappointing.
Oh, it was so hot. And the Contours, if you'll recall, their Motown act, all dressed up in their suits, really nice suits and ties, and they went out and they must have soaked through every inch of clothing. Because they both gave great shows.
Yeah, that was a great show, and it was a shame that more people didn't get to see that.
Yeah, and it was just because of the humidity and the heat were just overpowering that August. And I think we're going to have more and more of those kind of problems as things heat up.
Yeah.
It's be interesting to see how these festivals handle things. Then in 95, you may recall, we did this one. Remember the Child.
Oh, yes.
And this was Dick Wagner's dream of performing with the symphony, having his music performed with the symphony. I can't tell you how much work went into that. That was about a year project. I was the head of it, and we worked on that for about a year, getting the money. We supported 4 child abuse and neglect councils, Flint, Saginaw, Bay City, Midland. And when we got done, we wrote several $1,000 checks to each one of those groups. And who was the Saginaw Symphony director?
Leo Najjar.
Leo Najjar scored all that music. And we went to Saginaw Valley State University. We wanted to have that feel. It was in the center of the mid-Michigan, and we wanted that university feel. That was a mistake because when the sun goes down, they have bugs coming out you've never seen or heard of in your life. There was bugs everywhere, and we had Josh White Jr. perform, the Martin Luther King Choir, and John Bradshaw, the great author who had done recently some PBS specials. That was a high-powered event. Dick got John Bradshaw to fly out and do it as a friend.
Now, there's some of that is on YouTube, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And I introduced I think some part of the show, or maybe the main part, I don't remember. But I remember we did not have enough people to handle the crowd when we got to the event. My goal was going to be just to MC and take photographs. I never got my camera out. We were putting out so many fires. And of course, Dick had a new 45, didn't he? He was going, and it didn't arrive. It was being printed by a CD company in Canada, and it did not get across the border in time to be able to sell at the concert. And I know that had to be really hard on Dick, because he was, one of the things, of all the musicians I've ever worked with, and let me know what you think, Scott, because you worked with Dick. Dick Wagner thought of everything, including the business side of the deal. He could write, he could perform, sing, produce, do all the music stuff, but he was just as smart on the promotion, how you market it, how you get the word out. He was good at every element of the business.
Yeah, and a lot of it was when he came back to town here, he wanted to bring that professionalism to our area.
Downtown studios.
Yeah, and that was, saying, hey, I've already stepped out and did all this stuff, so let me bring a little bit of that here and show you how it is, how it can be, how things could be if it was done correctly.
Yeah.
And he worked his ass off on all that.
Yes, he did.
Well, he pioneered a lot of that with the Boss Men, though.
Yes, he did.
As far as, making your own records and going on the radio and
tracking down radio stations,
and doing skits.
Our last couple podcasts have all kind of talked about how he was an originator in that realm.
Really, he was way ahead of his time.
Yeah, and he was always out beating the drum to newspapers, radio stations, getting television stations to get the word out. And then when you think of all the production work he's done for other artists, I mean, there's still stuff out there that we probably don't know about that he put together.
Yeah, well, we talked about Cherry Slush and, that production job he did on I Cannot Stop You. Wow, that was pretty impressive.
He also, we talked about before, he plays one solo on I can't think of the name of the group, but it's a reggae group on Atlantic Records. Side 2, the first song, solo guitar, Dick Wagner.
That's cool.
And then he turns around and works with Air Supply and gives them a song.
Yeah.
I mean, he could work with anybody. When I was at Delta College, this had to be, how many years ago did he pass? 5 or 6?
Oh, it's been longer than
7
that, I think.
Or 7, I think. 6 or 7, yeah.
So I was at Delta, their newspaper, the Delta College Collegiate, had a high school or had a college group that had done their first recording. And this must have been, just before he passed. He produced the whole thing, everything they did. And I said, my goodness, Dick's work goes everywhere,
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was in Arizona at that point.
Yeah. He's one of the great musicians to come out of our area.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Well, you've continued to do a lot of good things over the years. I was just reading about your endowment that you and your wife Sandy have put together at Delta College. You tell us a little bit about that. That's a pretty interesting idea that you had there.
Environment is a big part of I worked in the chemical industry for 26 years. I worked with great scientists. I was not a great science student, but I worked with these people who were members of the American Chemical Society, and I really developed an appreciation for the environment and how we've got to step up our game. And so sustainability is the concept you hear about all the time. And the idea that you can't take more out, if you take more out than what you're putting back, you're going to destroy the future for future generations. So it was a scholarship built on sustainability. And it's been interesting. There's been 2 students now that have received it, both from small towns. One from Merrill, Michigan, one from Coleman, Michigan. And that, for Sandy and I, my wife and I feel good we can help. I'm developing another scholarship that'll be related to the arts. I can't talk about it now because I'm waiting for the stock market to get back on track.
Hopefully it'll get back on track.
Yeah, I think it will eventually, but I don't want to do just one. I want to do more. I've never been a person who needs boats and cottages, and I've always been a pretty simple person. I'm very grateful for everything I've been given, and I want to do some things that will have some legacy.
Well, I hope that that catches on, because that's certainly a great concept. And of course, the environment, as we're seeing almost on a daily basis, wow, you wonder, are we a little late to the game here?
We are late to the game.
Yeah.
We are late to the game. And if you'll recall, in 1970, I believe it was the Nixon administration got the Environmental Protection Agency going. There was a lot, and Earth Day started,
Yes.
I think, was it 70 or 72?
I think it was...
Was it 70?
I think it was 70, yes.
So our radio station would side up with kids that this was an issue. Our little teen radio station, and we got behind environmental messages working with youth groups because there was a lot of energy in 68, 69, 70 on this issue. We've got to be cleaner, do better things.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that, that I think it's more alive today. The issue is more alive today, but not with everybody.
Yeah, that's one where you really kind of wish that everybody could kind of come together on this one.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can't get people to come together on this issue. I don't know if you're going to get any cooperation on anything.
Because it's all about our children, grandchildren, and future generations. You've got thousands and thousands of species that are now endangered because where we're headed is not good. It's not good. We gotta step up our game.
Definitely.
So, do you have any more big plans to put any more music shows and festivals together before in the next 5-10 years? You got any visions that you got going on here? I mean, you've been a big part of the scene since the day one. I just was curious, what do you have left in you?
I'm running out. I so admire Gary and the folks that worked with Gary to put on that exhibit. You've really brightened up the Bay County Historical Society with that activity, and I'm big into supporting history. I'm doing things with the Castle Museum, little things and big things, and so I do film poster exhibits.
That was great.
And did you see that?
Yeah, of course.
It was the major exhibit last year at the Castle Museum.
Yeah, it was great.
And I'm working on film posters are a combination of art and advertising. And the original ones that were created by hand by artists, going from 1900 to 1970 are the ones to me that are really interesting. And there's so much history. So I try to showcase film posters that have a Michigan connection. You can't always do that, but that's always in the back of my mind. And setting up this art scholarship is in the future. But there's someone I'd like to propose to you for your podcast. Just a thought, Scott.
Sure.
I've followed the Midland artists for a long time. Most people have forgotten that Butch Heath came out of Midland, Michigan.
I read that in that Midland book about musicians.
Yes. And
Who that author of that book doesn't want to come on. But
is that Mike O'Brien?
yes.
Okay.
I think he lives somewhere else now, doesn't he?
Yeah, he doesn't live in the area. I do congratulate Michael O'Brien for doing that. It's not a perfect book, but it at least gives you an idea of what was happening in Midland.
But that's where I read about Butch Heath being from Midland.
Butch Heath was a Midlander who started with a rockabilly group and would book, I don't know, places and do rockabilly music when nobody was doing that in our area. And then he veered, being rockabilly, he veered to country and had quite a career in country all these years. Just retired in his 80s this year, 2022. And he has that festival out in Freeland he does, where they bring in all these country acts, and they call it, is it Parkapalooza or something like that?
Yes, I think it
Did
is.
they already have it?
Yes, they did. And Butch does a nice job. He always performs. Well, Butch announced this would be his last one. So they named it, I think it's Butchapalooza. Is the name they've got for it. I think he's before, I don't know how much longer he's going to be around. He goes to Florida like I do. He plays in a band in Florida. It's not like he's just playing here in Midland. But he is a great story. There's got to be something there. I've always wanted to interview him, and it never worked out. But that's a great story.
Absolutely. No, that would fit totally.
I tried that. I've known Butch a long time, and I've asked him to. I wanted to include him in my next book. So I asked him about 50s country music or something like that.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, that was before my time." And that was the end of that.
I think he started at about 55, and he talks about they had the ducktails, and the hairstyle, and I'm guessing, maybe some of that Sun Records rubbed off on him in those early days.
Yeah. He sounds like he would be a great guest.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Butch. He's been around. I've ran into Butch on and off for the years. We're Facebook friends. I had no clue the background, but then again, my vision wasn't where his vision's at. So yeah, that'd be great. That'd be wonderful for this.
Yeah, that's where I read about him is from that book. And I became, when I lived in Ann Arbor, I became good friends with Randy Markey.
Okay, he was from one of the bands.
Many of the early bands.
Yeah. The most successful band was the Seventh Court.
He was in that. I think
Seventh Court, and we have a 5-minute recording. I'm hoping, Scott, you'll be able to
I will
use it.
put that on the show. Yes.
And Sam Peach is the first voice you hear on that recording, and Sam was with the Seventh Court.
Oh.
Seventh Court was Hirsch Goodwald. Mm-hmm. He managed them, and I think after the blue light shut down, it was originally the Rogues, and then they changed to the Seventh Court. Hirsch Goodwald took them all the way to the Grandy Ballroom, where they tried out. But the who was it? Russ? What was his name?
Russ Gibbs.
Yeah, he didn't pick them to perform, but they did try out at the Grandy Ballroom. He performed all over the band. He took the band all over Michigan, and they played. And they were kind of like a soulful version of Chicago or Blood, Sweat, and Tears, because they had horns, and they were very, very popular in Midland. They did a song called "One-Eyed Witch," which didn't do anything. But we all loved the Seventh Court. That was our big band back then.
Yeah, I think Randy Markey was in the Rogues, and then he didn't go in, or if he was in the Seventh Court, he was only there briefly, if I remember
Well, I have
correctly.
photos, but I'll have to look at them again.
I'm trying to think, because I interviewed him when I wrote a story about the blue light.
Yeah.
And, he was right there at the beginning, so
Right.
it was a great source of information.
Yeah.
Well,
And he's still recording. I see him, he's releasing stuff. We're Facebook friends, so, yeah, he puts out new music regularly.
Mark Sanders, I believe, was in that group.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Maybe
Mark
I'm thinking of Mark
Sanders.
Sanders.
Yeah, he's
that's
up
what you're
north
thinking
in
of.
Traverse
Right.
City, and
Yeah.
he is still putting out
Yeah,
stuff.
I'm my mistake.
Right.
Yes, Mark Sanders, not Randy.
But
Because he had a good blues band.
I
way
guess
back,
he did.
Way
Yeah.
back when.
Yeah, the and that book that came out really didn't talk about Butch Heath or anything before the garage bands of the mid '60s.
Right.
Another artist they left out in Midland. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. Bob Harris and the Kings Four. Does that mean anything to any of you?
Yes. I have a picture of their 40. Well, I have the 45 with the picture sleeve.
You've got the picture sleeve. Whoa.
So I have that picture for my next book, but I don't know anything about the group.
Well, they, I thought they put out an album, and they
Did. I have a picture of that.
and 2 singles. And this would have been pre-64. This would have been like
Right.
61, 2 or 3, somewhere in
Okay.
there. And they played all over the state. They played at Boblo Island. They're popular at Boblo Island. And this was a Midland group. They were managed by a Saginaw company run by Dave Opperman.
Ah.
Dave Opperman's still going.
Oh, yeah.
And we believe that Bob Harris is still alive. But that's another one. That's another forgotten name coming out of Midland that people have forgotten about.
Were they a vocal and instrumental group, or
I think they
just
were
instrumental?
I think they were more instrumental.
Yeah,
but-
I think they were.
Yeah, because that was really popular back
Looking
in
at
that
the
era,
picture of the band, that's
yeah,
on
the instrumentals. Were,
yeah. I think you're right, because Teeny Weeny and whatever the flip side is, I think they're both instrumentals. They kind of borrowed from the Ventures and some of those artists from back then.
yeah.
Well,
It'd be interesting. To
that's
track
how
that
I
down,
started out playing drums, was with headphones on, listening to the Ventures
Yeah.
Oh gosh, how many of
or
us?
Sandy Nelson.
Or Sandy Nelson, yes.
How many of us learn from those 2 acts? That's
Right.
absolutely true.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Scott, for coming on here. Is there anything else that you have on your notes there that we may want to add to the show here?
Well, I heard you ask Lori Middlebrook about what's new and hot that you like. There's a couple of groups that kind of interested me. One is one that's been around a long time, Larry McCrae. I don't know what you think, but I think his new album is incredible.
Yeah.
It is the defining album of his career. He worked with Bonamassa on that one, and I'm really happy for him. And what saddens me about Midland is someone like Larry McCrae has never played at the Midland Center for the Arts, nor question mark in the Mysterians. And it's always saddened me that some of these major local performers never made it to our Center for the Arts, and I don't know why. The other one, are you guys familiar with Stone Street Revival? Mm-hmm. Wow. They're tearing up Midland. But I think they have a couple of musicians from Midland, but I don't know really where they're from. Are they from Lansing?
Oh, Donnie's from Lansing and Saginaw, Donnie Brown,
Okay, yeah.
The bass player's from Bay City,
Yeah.
I think, and Scott Vandel's from Bay City. I can't remember everybody who's in that band, but that's pretty much a super group,
A super group that does, and they've all had pretty distinguished backgrounds, but they never recorded, have they? It's not original material.
No, it's all covers. It's a
Yeah,
cover
all
band.
cover, yeah.
Yep.
Anyways, I think they're both kind of interesting acts at this moment.
We've had Larry on our show. We've had Donnie Brown on our show. We've had a lot of. We talk about Scott Vandel a lot on the show too, but Lori, we were mainly when we were talking to her was about modern country.
Yeah, I just saw a picture on Facebook. Speaking of Donnie Brown, the Greg Nagy band who backs up Larry. It was played up in Traverse City last night or tonight or something. Said featuring Donnie Brown on drums.
Wow. Donnie got to work with
Thornetta in Europe.
Thornetta. He worked with Seeger's guitar player. Remember that's on the podcast?
Oh,
So
yeah.
he's just getting some good slip-ins here.
We've never had Thornetta Davis play in Midland. That's
That's
what you
something.
mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many holes. That's why I come over to Bay City. It's all happening.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Well, you do
Thornetta
know
played
coming
Bay City
up
number
in Saginaw on August 11th or 12th is Larry McCrae and
Yes.
Cherie Williams.
Yes, at Friday Night Live. Yes, that'll be fun. That'll be fun to see. You know who I think Midland's greatest artist ever came out of Midland?
Bobby Reynolds. No,
Bobby Randall, you're thinking of.
Randall.
Bobby Randall's great. He's playing with one of the hottest, maybe the hottest country band in Florida right now, Orange Blossom Opry Band. They are top drawer. No, I think the greatest artist that ever came out of Midland was Cheryl Studer. She
Never heard of
is a opera diva. She's performed on the biggest opera stages in the world. She's been at the New York Met. She's duetted with Pavarotti. She was one of the top teachers of opera music in the world. And she just recently retired.
And moved back to Midland?
No. She's living in Germany.
Oh.
Yeah, and so I remember I was able to buy an autographed photograph of Cheryl Studer and some other stuff, some sheet music and stuff. And to the person I bought it from, who was in Germany, I said, I'm from Midland, Michigan, where Cheryl Studer got her start. And is she big in Germany? You know, because I know she's been on all the big opera stages. And the guy came back to me like I'm a doofus or something. You don't know how big Cheryl Studer is? She's huge, and she is. She's really big. What's amazing to me about her, she grew up in Midland, Michigan. At the age of 12, she knew she wanted to be an opera singer. Most opera singers don't start developing until their later teens. She knew at 12 she wanted to be an opera singer. By 16, she knew she wanted to teach opera.
Wow.
And she ended her career as one of the world-class master teachers in opera. Pull her up on YouTube. She's an amazing person.
I was going to say we need a opera singer.
Yeah, that's something that we haven't really tackled on here before. That's
Well, you get into the budget and fly her from Germany in a
we
Tri-City.
might have to. Surprise, surprise.
Well, she's recorded with big symphonies. I have several of her.
Well, I heard
CDs.
you say Pavarotti.
Yeah.
That was enough for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't get much bigger than that.
Yeah.
Man, well, thank you.
She was born in Midland too.
I don't know if she was born, but she grew up in Midland, and
I'm just wondering, how did she get involved? Was there an operatic kind of thing going on in Midland that we didn't know about? A training?
Well, Midland always was into classical music, and but this is what I heard in one of her YouTube interviews, or one of the interviews with her. She talked about going to the library and checking out opera performers.
Wow.
And because, in those days, they weren't real prevalent record stores. We went to Lucky's and all the, the great record stores. You just didn't see that stuff in the stores.
No.
It's funny. There is a store in New York that only sells opera and classical. And it's a huge store. It's right near the Met. And people come out of that store with bagfuls of CDs, and I don't know, maybe vinyl. When I saw them, it was all CDs, because they can't find it anyplace else in the United States. It is a one-of-a-kind
School
store.
Kids Records, the classical store, did very well.
Yeah. And there are certain people that collect that stuff. I have a little bit, but not much. But Cheryl Studer was a huge name in the 80s and 90s. And as I say, she's now retired. And still well remembered.
I'll have to look for that name when I see an opera record.
Right. That's awesome. That's something that I've never come across our radar ever. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you.
I'm glad. I just, if we could.
Those are the things that we're looking for. I mean, we're always talking about digging the archives and pulling in every style of music, but very rarely do we get to have a person on the show, like a DJ, especially. This is the best part. We get little nuanced things of area performances, and usually I have to dig it out of people, like, who else did you see or remember playing? But to come in here with the knowledge of some more Michigan music that we haven't had yet, that's pretty fantastic. That gives us more options, and also for feedback for our listeners to say, oh my gosh, here's this, here's that, and all of a sudden hopefully we can get it populated on our sites that everybody can dig into it.
She did a lot at Interlochen. You were asking, was it just Michigan or just Midland? Mm-hmm. She also supplemented heavily at Interlochen and felt very strongly that's where she needed to be to advance, her skills. But and Butch Heath, as we've mentioned, Bobby Randall would be a great interview too.
I've talked to Bobby over the years.
See, a long time ago, in the 70s, when my partner in my record shop, John Kohut, worked at WXOX. Is that the country station?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He was friends with Butch Heath. That's how I met him. But I got to be a judge in a talent contest at the Saginaw Fairgrounds. And the main artist that day was Crystal Gale, who was beautiful. But anyways, Bobby Randall was one of the contestants, and I didn't vote for him.
Great story, Fred.
And then when I found out, years later that he was like in Sawyer Brown, I thought, what?
And Confederate Railroad too.
Yeah, and I've seen him on something, and I don't know why.
He was a DJ too for a while here in
Gladwin, Gladwin, wasn't it?
Gladwin, right. They prank called me one morning at Pat when I was a cook at Pat and Jerry's in Auburn, and he's like, "Sir, I'm locked in the bathroom," and I'm like, "I'm the only guy at 6 o'clock in the morning,"
Sounds like Bob.
So that's how good the talent was that year, though.
Yeah.
I mean, he came in second place, and I can't really remember who came in first, but
It was your vote, Fred. I just hope
Fred.
I hope
Could
he
have
hasn't
been.
been holding a grudge all these years.
The kid that sang.
well, if he hears it, then he'll know all these years what happened.
He could have had to step up a lot earlier.
Right? Yeah. I don't think any other contestants ever went.
If
as
you would have
far
played a
as them.
washboard, he would have been your vote. That makes the difference.
Well, that's how I got the gig.
Yes, exactly. That's awesome.
I love Fred's posts on all these groups you've played with, and often it's washboard. It's wonderful.
And it sounds
Well,
good.
It's an amazing thing. I learned because of that. I've learned all kinds of music,
I believe it.
from Ukrainian to Italian to Irish to reggae to calypso.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Freddie. What a great way to wrap this up. Thank you, Scott, for having
Thank you.
coming to see us.
Pleasure.
We will gladly have you come in here and be with us if we can pull Butch in here for a talk. I think that'd be a wonderful little
Yeah,
thing.
definitely.
If you'd like to join us.
I would. I just, he's just one of those stories that's been under the radar.
Definitely.
I think it would be wise to have someone like yourself here and then to finally catch up on that dream of getting him and his story out there. So we will see you again. We will talk to you again. And please keep us in mind when you are doing all your
Sure.
music stuff that you put out there.
Thanks.
Thank you for all your years, too. What you've done in this area is huge.
I mean, the way I feel is musicians are so underappreciated. They're not paid, in my opinion, what they deserve to be paid today. And I'm
one of the good ones.
and so here's what happens. I'll see a group. I won't mention their name. A local group that's very good, playing at a local venue that has money. I won't say the venue either. And I'll go and I'll ask the band, did you get paid? No, we just get the opportunity to play.
Oh boy.
I go to the organization and chew their ear big time. Artists deserve to be paid. They deserve to be recognized. They've worked hard. They've got all of that effort, energy, and talent that they've put into it. They deserve the recognition, and I feel really strongly about that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've just got
that's a huge that's a huge thing. There's a lot of the alternative guys out there that play the little club shows or little house shows. They get their first venture on a Midland street or on somewhere downtown here and locally anyway. And it's like a lot of it's paid by the door over the course of 8 bands or 5 bands, and it spreads pretty thin if at all. So yeah, the artistry is always on the bottom. So unfortunately, that's how it's been forever. And if there's always someone that'll take that gig, though, that's where the buck's got to stop. But thank you, Scott, for the promotion. My mic's flying in and out. Do you guys hear that?
Yep.
Yeah, it's been doing that on and off. We had this issue a few weeks ago too. But anyway, thank you, you guys, for coming in here. It's been a wonderful show.
It's great. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.
The MMHP is hosted on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and our own Libsyn podcast site. You can also search MMHP989 on Facebook for up-to-the-minute information, as well as both Dr. J and Sir Fred's album picks of the week, posted every weekend. You can connect with Scott on the web at scottbakermusic.com, Dr. J at MichiganRock'n'RollLegends.com, Sir Fred at FredRife.com. Brought to you by Michigan Rock and Roll Legends, located both inside the Bay County Historical Museum on Washington Avenue, as well as Scotty's Sandbar on Evergreen Drive at the Bay City Middle Grounds.
On behalf of the hosts, Gary, Dr. J. Johnson, Sir Fred Rife, archivist and videographer Mike Beatty, and myself, this podcast wouldn't be here without Studio 163's Alan Garcia, the voice of MMHP, Mr. Eddie Switek, all of our guests, and you, the listeners.
You've been listening to the MMHP and the 989. From all of us at the podcast, we want to thank you for tuning in.
Question Mark apparently showed up at St. Joseph's Church last week.
What?
And I don't know if he played with the band, but the Mysterians were playing there. I saw this on Facebook.
In Saginaw?
Yeah, and they have an annual, and that's been the only time that Question Mark has come out to play. Has been
Since COVID, yeah.
Since he knows the priest or something. Well, even before.
Oh, yeah, he probably went
He
to
knows
church.
him or something, and so he does it for him.
Well, that's very nice, yeah.
But I don't
think the
know.
last time Question Mark performed was at that thing that Bobby set up to help feed the homeless there.
Well, then
it was probably about 3 years ago, right?
That's the last time I saw him.
Yeah. Joe, you know,
Fred's
getting gunshot.
He is. This is unusual. Get your washboard out. You'll tell us all of it. Come on.
So where did Question Mark show up at? What?
St. Joe's. They have an annual summer.
Okay.
You know, and a few years ago, when I was still living in Ann Arbor, they had Count the Colony, Question Mark and the Mysterians, original.
Did they get the original guys to Count the Colony?
I think so.
Wow.
You said a few years ago? Are you sure that wasn't like 67, 68?
No.